Hi, and welcome to Building a Software as a Service application with Rails. In this series, I will show how to build a multi-tenant software as a service application, similar to Harvest or Basecamp, using Ruby on Rails. In this episode, we're going to be covering the introduction and setup of our application. First, I'm going to provide an overview of the application that we're going to be building. I'm going to demonstrate creation of a new Rails project. Then we're going to set up the testing environment. And finally, we're going to write our first high-level integration test. Before we get started coding, let's create a basic flow diagram for our application. Initially, a user is going to land on our landing page and be shown a pricing table. When they select a pricing tier, they're going to be shown an account sign-up page where they can enter their user information, their name, email address, and things like that. And additionally, they are going to select a subdomain which they can later visit to access their account. When they visit their subdomain, they will be asked to sign in with the credentials that they created on their account sign-up page, and then they will be able to use our service. They will be able to add users, manage their account, change their pricing tier, and a bunch of other things. Now, the application that I'm going to be building is a simple time tracking service. However, I would encourage everybody to build their own application. I'm going to be keeping the core functionality of the application very simple, and I'm going to focus on all of the generic functionality that would be applicable to any service. I thought we would take a quick look at Harvest just so we can see a concrete example of what we would like to do. As you can see, when we visit the Harvest website, we land on their landing page, and we can click a button that says Try Harvest for free. This takes us to a sign-up page similar to the one that we are going to be building, where we can enter our name, email address, password, and a web address, a subdomain that we can visit to see our account. Now, I've signed up for this in the background. When I visit my account URL, I can enter my username and password and access my account. I can view my account, I can track time, I can also manage my account. I can upgrade my plan, I can add users, I can create new projects, etc. So this is essentially what we are going to try and replicate. Into the code, I'm going to start by creating a new Rails application. I'm going to use Postgres as the database, and this will be important later because we are going to be using a Postgres specific feature called schemas to implement our multi-tenancy, and I'm going to be using RSpec for this application, so we will skip unit test. I'm going to start by opening up the project in Sublime Text. Typically I use Vim for editing code, but for the screencast I'm going to use Sublime. Hopefully it will be easier for everybody to follow, see what I'm doing. I'm going to start by just removing some directories that we won't need right away. We'll go ahead and set up our database YAML file. We're going to be using Postgres for the database, and these settings will likely depend on your own development machine. For now, make sure you set up the development and test environments. In our console, we'll navigate to our time tracker directory and start our server. So let's take a look at our application in the browser, and it looks like everything went right. If you have any errors here, it's probably due to your database YAML setup. Of this screencast, we're going to focus on setting up our testing environment and creating our first high-level acceptance test. Here in the gem file, I'm just going to remove the unnecessary comments and add some testing gems that we'll be using. We are not going to be using turbo links, the JSON API builder, or the documentation gems. So what I want to do is set up my test environment right away and get going. You can spend a lot of time optimizing your test setup, but for a new application, my experience is you just want to pick something and go with it, and if you have problems, you can adjust your test setup later. Starting from the top, we're going to be using guard, which will monitor files, and when they're saved, it will perform an action for us. We're going to be using guard live reload. When you save certain files, it will reload the browser automatically for you to save you some time. Guard rspec will run our tests when our files are saved. rspec Rails, rspec is a testing library for Ruby. Capybara is for integration testing with Rails. Factory Girl is a gem that allows us to create factories for when we need an instance of a active record object. Database Cleaner cleans up our database after the test runs. We don't exactly need this right away, but we will need it later, so I'm going to set it up now. And shoulda, which gives us powerful matchers for testing our models and controllers. Remove turbo links from our gem file, we'll have to remove the references to it from various other files. So in our application JS file, we'll have to remove turbo links here. And also in our application layout file, we'll have to remove the references to turbo links. Then I'm going to run bundle install back in the console. And with my gems installed, I can now generate the files necessary for guard and rspec. Look at the file that rspec install generated for us. The easiest thing I think to do to get started is to just copy a spec helper that you used on a previous project. First thing I'm going to do is clear out all of these comments. I'm going to require database cleaner and capybara rspec. And for the rspec configuration, like I said, I'm just going to copy in a configuration from a previous project. Now this is just a start. Once you get going on the project, you can always come back to this and fix it up later. Since we're not using devise yet, we'll have to comment this out. That set up, let's create our first high-level integration test. These types of integration tests are often called features, so I'm going to make a features directory under the spec directory. Inside the features directory, I'm going to make a new file, and we'll call it account creation feature spec. Inside the account creation feature spec, we want to describe what the user will go through when they create an account. First thing we need to do is require our spec helper file that we just set up previously. What we want the user to do when they create an account is visit the root path of our application, click on a button that says something like create account, fill in a form, and then they should click the form submission button and see signed up successfully. Now the form should be pretty standard. We're going to ask the user for their name, email address, and a password, and we're also going to allow them to name their subdomain that they would like. So when they visit, for example, test_subdomain.myapp.com, they will be directed to their account. Back in the console, let's go ahead and run our test. We'll start up guard and press enter. Now we have an undefined method route path, and that's simply because we haven't defined a route path in our route file. So at least we know our test setup is working, and this is enough for this episode.